Hello, everybody. This is Miss V, and I'm glad we're back. We are here talking with me, and we're going to talk about the interwar period. This is the time period between World War One and World War Two. These are your guided notes 13, not 3, 13.1, and we're talking about instability after World War One. So let's get started. All right, so there was a certain uneasiness and non-security, I should say, after World War One. Okay, things were very uneasy, and even so, most Americans, most people of the United States, did not want to be involved in World War One per se. And after World War One ended, they did not want to be included in any form of European affairs. They wanted to continue this sense of isolationism and neutrality, right? So, because of that, the U.S. Senate, despite what President Wilson, who introduced the idea with the 14 points, despite his feelings, the United States Senate did not ratify or approve that the Treaty of Versailles, right? They didn't approve of it. And because they didn't approve of it, that means that they could not join the League of Nations. And because they didn't join the League of Nations, that means that the League of Nations wasn't really as effective as it could be. And now the League of Nations dissolves. It became a failure. Okay? And it wouldn't be until much later that we'll have another organization that comes up that really tries to establish this peacekeeping strategy throughout the world, right? All right, so as I mentioned, tensions were already high, and with the Paris Peace Conference and the Treaty of Versailles, a lot of European nations were still unhappy during this time between 1919 and 1924. As a matter of fact, the French government, as you see here, demanded even stricter enforcement of the Treaty of Versailles, particularly on that policy of reparations, which were payments that was supposed to be paid by Germany for war damages, right? Germany was able to make their first payment in 1921, but a year later, Germany fell on hard times and they had a large economic crisis, and they were not able to pay that money or their reparations because literally their people were suffering and could not, work or could not afford things like food and so forth. So this became a big problem, especially for those countries that were relying on the reparations to help rebuild them back from World War One. And as you see here in this political cartoon, that kind of shows you how Germany was saddled with this large amount of reparations to pay, right? Because here's Germany, this is the reparations. So a lot of German workers, as you see here, they went on strike. And to compensate for the lack of money that was flowing, the German government decides, okay, well, since this is a problem with money, let's just print more money, right? But that's a problem because there was already inflation, meaning that the prices of goods and services was already really high. But now, because they are printing so much money, they're printing more paper money, the value of that paper money became worthless. It didn't mean anything because the pricing of goods and services was so high that the money, it just didn't mean anything. As you see here, this young woman is dressed in German marks, right? And the children, the money is so worthless that they're playing, with German marks that are like blocks, right? Like Lego blocks and stuff, because it was so worthless. As you see here in 1914, 4 marks at one point equaled $1, right? But by the time 1923 happened, 4.2 trillion marks equaled $1, right? So that, imagine that you take taking $1 and you're going to the store maybe to buy candy or something like that. But at that time, the German mark, or their currency, was so worthless that you had to have 4.2 trillion marks in order to get a candy bar. That's what it was. That bad. Yes, that bad. Right? So of course that's going to present problems. So out of this, there was a plan, and it was an international financial system that was developed by an American banker named Dawes. And he chaired this international finance committee. And they decided to reduce Germany's reparations. But also they tried to establish somewhat of a payment plan. And it allowed Germany to be able to lower their payment plan, and then the United States would loan them money that they could pay their allies, right, in the reparation payments, and then the allies would then pay their payments, their war payments, to the United States, because they were paying certain fees to the United States for war payments as well. And you know, that was the cycle that the Dawes Plan was, as you see here in this graphic. Soon, as you see here, it kind of opened the door to a lot of American investment in Europe, and because of that, the United States was able to experience a brief time of prosperity, because they were getting so much money from Europe through these war debt payments, right, that they were receiving from their allies because of World War I. So also during this time, the Treaty of Locarno was passed, and this was a way to try to bridge the gap and try to, you know, help Germany out with their financial issues, but also to quell a lot of the tension that was happening through a lot of the European nations, especially with Germany, right, and France, because they were just added. So with the Treaty of Locarno, that guaranteed Germany's western borders with France and Belgium. So France was able to gain their borders and have, their agreements, and Germany was able to gain their areas with that agreement. And now they are able to negotiate, and now they're kind of lowering their weapons. They're saying, okay, we're good. And now there's this, with this treaty, they figure that there's something may happen here, right? So that's what you see here with the lady representing Europe, and she's kind of moving towards disarmament. So they're hoping with this treaty that it would move them towards some form of disarmament and not moving towards war, right? However, 1929 happens. Between 1924 and 1929, even though there was a brief period of prosperity, there was some factors that came into place that sunk the world's economy. So not just Europe, but also the United States. So a lot of these major superpowers, their economy tanked. And what that is known as a depression. So when it happens on a large scale, when the economy, fails or it drops in such a dramatic fashion for a long period of time, it's called a depression, okay? And that economic collapse became known at this time as the Great Depression. And there were 4 factors, as you see here, that came into that play. There was a series of economic downturns in a lot of individual nations, such as Germany, Great Britain, United States, etc. The United States playing a big part in that with the U.S. stock market crash in 1929. So when the stock market plummeled because people were selling stocks more than they were worth, because that's what happened in the stock market crash. That caused economies worldwide to pummel, right? Also, there was an uneven distribution of wealth. So we talked about that before when we talked about industrialization and even in imperialism, where now we have this middle class, but the middle class and the upper class are having all of the wealth, and the working class are seeing no benefits from that, right? And then, fourth of all, there was a surplus of agricultural products such as corn. They had way too much corn for what they needed. So if there's so much corn and there's no demand for it, then you just have a bunch of corn sitting around and nobody's buying it. So that does not help farmers if they have a overproduction of crops and they can't sell them, right? So that's pretty much what was happening during this time, and which caused the Great Depression to happen during the 1920s, right? So based on what we just mentioned, why was the stock market crash of 1929 such a major problem, not just in the United States but internationally? And a hint for you, take a look at one of the factors that contributed to the Great Depression. If you think about that, one of those factors, this will let you to know why the stock market was such a big problem in terms of not just in the United States but internationally. Okay, go ahead and answer that question in Edpuzzle and in your guided notes.